All right, we're rolling. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm share a track.
Welcome to Artist Notes. I'm your host, Diego Rivera. This week I'm joined by musician, composer, arranger, educator, and my good friend Etienne Charles. Etienne is originally from the island of Trinidad and is known for his unique combination of Caribbean, African, and American styles of music. He is a 2015 Guggenheim Fellowship recipient in the creative arts and has recorded 7 albums as a leader. It's always a pleasure sharing the bandstand with him, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation with Etienne on this week's episode of Artist Notes.
Well, Etienne Charles, thank you for joining. It was a real pleasure making some of this music with you, and I have a great deal of respect, and I've always had a great deal of admiration for you, especially how you're able to incorporate so much of your heritage into your music. I mean, it just runs side by side, and it's all up inside of it, and it's you can't separate the history from the music, and I really respect that. It makes it really honest and makes it really true. It's something that I've always admired about you. So
Thank you.
I'd like to know if you could talk about the role that your own indigenous roots plays in your music.
Yeah, I mean, well, thanks first off, thanks for having me on the record. It's a fun session. I mean, I remember learning this music for a gig in 2010 at Bay City State Theater, with Sean Dobbins playing drums, and I remember that's when I learned in and out.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, heritage is it's a really, for both of us, it's really important. You with your heritage, and me with mine, and I think that's one of the reasons why we connect so strongly, personally and musically. I came to jazz really late. I came to jazz in college, and so early on, what I was introduced to were sounds that always had both sides. As we know throughout the history of jazz, there are major influences from the Caribbean, specifically Haiti, Martinique, Cuba, and the Southern Caribbean, but also Mexico, with the cavalry band. I can't remember which got them 18th. I can't remember which cavalry was. And so it's always been there. And I was lucky enough early on to be introduced to people like David Sanchez's music, Miguel Zenon, who were really overtly and really explicitly incorporating. I mean, I don't want to say incorporating because there's a lot of improvisation in our musics, in Mexican music, and in music of the Caribbean. The improvisation runs through all Afro-descendant musical styles. And so with respect to heritage, it's really about, like you did with that suite, for Dolores Huerta. It's really just about taking a story and telling it passionately. And that's really what you do with your composition and with your playing, is that you take a story, and whatever that story is about, it's gonna come through your lens. And that it's really kind of how we both think going along the same lines, and then the sound is the sound.
Mm-hmm.
The sound, the groove, whether it's a groove or whether it's a harmonic style or whether it's solo changes with hits going on, which is something that we both do a lot. And so yeah, that's for me. It's really just about once you understand the story and the history, and you connect it to the heritage that we both are. I mean, you came up playing in Tejano bands, I came up playing in Calypso group. So then, like, with respect to how we incorporate it into whatever you want to call the music that we do, it's kind of already there. So we don't really need to incorporate it because it's already in our way of processing the music and processing how we want it to be brewed.
This song was inspired by musicians opposing apartheid in South Africa, and was composed by Cannonball Adderley. It was his impression, his tribute to the Marabi movement, the musicians of Marabi, and it's incredibly uplifting. And there's a real sense of hope, and not only hope, but there's a real sense of freedom. And a attachment to that freedom and the feeling that they deserve freedom. What's your process for working with music that isn't necessarily indigenous to your own culture?
With music that's not indigenous to my culture, I have a pretty simple process. I try to understand the ritual out of which the music comes, or because a lot of times the music that we hear comes from some sort of ritual. Like the music is a part of a bigger thing, whether it's a ceremony, whether it's mourning, whether it's a celebration. And so really, for one thing for me is understanding what that ritual is and trying to see it and partake in it. But also then understanding how that music relates to the body, specifically if there's a dance involved. And then once I understand how the dance is involved, and if it's a music that incorporates the instruments that we already play, meaning, drums, bass, if they're chordal instruments, guitar or quattro or banjo or piano, and if they're horns, or if there's a vocal style to it, I try to understand the shapes of those lines. So if there's a bass line, I try to understand how those bass lines are formed. Like the most common one that comes to mind is understanding a tumbao, right, or understanding how that shape is done. And then if there's adaptations that have to be done, like when I was in Costa Rica and I was with the indigenous people there, they have a style of singing, in thirds, and the melodies always go upward. And so I was like, so when I was writing that music, I kept that in mind so that my lines would, I would harmonize it with the alto or the tenor, go in and have the melody go up. So just to understand, like just studying each part, whether it's middle, high, or low frequency of the music, and what makes that music happen in terms of grooves and what makes it dance. And then luckily I play a little bit of percussion, and so I'm able to sit with percussionists in all of these places and get um, first hand knowledge or teaching of what is going on with the groove. So then when I get to the band room or I get to the rehearsal space, I'm able to then keep that knowledge going. And then, what we do, we're always looking for, like, jazz has been built on, really us searching for, our roots. And through that, we find all these other people. Dizzy Gillespie was very famous for his search for Channel Poser, right?
Right.
So it's for me. That's how I do it. I make sure that each level of the frequencies that I'm trying to cover what they do. So I'm not taking away from what they do, while then adding, I might put some different harmony on something, and then studying the improvisation as well. If there's an improvisation style, which there normally is, studying how their rhythmic lines are built, studying how, like, if the hits are on and 4, if the hits are on 4, like where their lines normally rhythmically cadence as opposed to where their lines normally melodically or harmonically cadence.
Right.
And then I sit down and try to write.
Music is inspired and takes inspiration from all different facets and all kind of all various different emotions that are indigenous to the human condition: struggle, happiness, love, sorrow, romance, melancholy, all these sort of things. So someone that's very interested in the music of people, in the story of people, how would you say that a troubled history helps to shape a musical idea?
I mean, a troubled history, I think knowledge of a troubled history or living through a troubled history, if you listen to most musics of marginalized people, not only does the music convey the emotion of, it's normally, like, from what I've seen, it normally shows multiple emotions at the same time, right? So if you look at the blues, the blues has this sadness, but it also has this hope, and if it comes from the church, there's also this joy, and so a troubled history, from all the music I study, most of the styles that I study are music that come from people with troubled histories, or who are going through troubled histories, and it's always there. When you listen to it, you feel what caused them to make the sound that they were making, whether the music was supposed to be an elixir or a distraction, or some sort of remedy, or some sort of, like, salt in the wound, some way of coping. A lot of times when you listen to, anytime I listen to that Branford Marsalis record and it starts with the Chain Gang, it's just a constant reminder. And I think it's important that the music tells the stories, because if it doesn't tell the stories, people won't know eventually. People eventually forget about what happens, and then you end up in a situation where history repeats itself because people forget about the effects of what happened before. Because as we know with mankind is cyclical being.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, the troubled history is I don't want to say it's necessary, but for all the music that I've studied, the history runs right alongside. As we both know, the history runs right alongside the sound, because the sound was a lot of times what got people through.
Right.
The Haitian Revolution, the music, the rara music, and the voodoo music was actually the music that fueled the revolution. You think about the Caribbean brass band music that fueled the Ashanti Wars, and like that's now the sound of that's like the basis, that's like the roots of high life music.
Yeah.
So there's always some struggling, but even in like Eastern European and Balkan music and Romani music,
Right. Right.
Mexican music, like you go down the list, and there was always some, whether it was because the musicians were in the army,
Mm-hmm.
and they played music to march, that was a lot of times what happened. So yeah, I think the troubled history is always there.
Mm-hmm.
Even when a culture has a beautiful history, a lot of times the art that you learn about comes from the troubled history. So like a lot, like in West Africa, a lot of times, depending on where you go, the music, there's songs that are specifically about being captured.
It seems like a lot of thorough research. It's not something that's I know, speaking from my own experiences, just out of a sign of respect, making sure that there's some thorough research behind what you put on paper or what you kind of come up with and ultimately give to musicians to perform. And
exactly, that's it's the least we could do, especially as for a lot of those people, we will be the introduction of their music to our audience.
Exactly, yeah.
So we want to do it right. We don't want to quote unquote mispronounce their name, as we say.
Right. That's wonderful. That's right on the money.
Oh,
yeah, names are important, man.
Yep. What's up, Luis?